I was chatting to my friend Miish the other day and she asked me, literally, Jules, how do you get enough protein? And I was like, excellent question, Miish. So here's what I told her. Actually, before we get to that, welcome to Joyful Eating for Menopause, episode 249. Today we're talking about how I eat enough protein. And the best bite I had recently, before we get into the protein stuff, speaking of protein, was my Irishman's been working on his stew recipes. Of course, you think Irish stew, but he doesn't call it Irish stew. He calls it lamb stew because we don't call it Irish stew. We call it lamb stew, right? And he made one with lamb shanks. And normally I find the Irish stew a little bit bland, to be honest, but he has really nailed it. And it was so delicious. The boys had it with spuds and with crusty sourdough bread and butter, but I had mine over some chopped up kale from the garden, Cavolo Nero, and it was super, super delicious. I love lamb, is like so delicious. Speaking of delicious protein, let's talk about how I eat enough protein. What we'll cover today, I'm going to share how I eat enough protein, what to watch out for as you are increasing your protein intake. And then I've got two bonus tips for you, and we'll finish it off with a microscopic habit for you to experiment with this week. In terms of how I eat enough protein, basically, my meals are based around protein. My framework for most of my meals is, which I teach in my Joyful Cooking program and in my 5-day challenge, which if you haven't taken, you should definitely take the Make a Healthy Meal Without a Recipe in 5 days. I'll link to that in the show notes. But my meals tend to be like I have veggies as a base, and then I have protein, and then I'll have serve with a sauce and some what I call flavor bombs to make it taste better. When I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat, sometimes I think about the veggie first, but mostly I think about the protein. That's how I base my meals. It's this protein first or protein forward, some people call it, approach. And then in terms of how much, this is something for you to experiment to find what's right for you. But for me, if I'm having eggs, poached eggs, or boiled eggs, I'll have 4 eggs. And I won't always eat them all. Sometimes that'll be too much for me, but generally I'll give my body the opportunity to have 4 eggs. Or if I'm having sardines, I'll have 2 cans of sardines, which I'm not sure how much that is in grams, but they're pretty standard size. And sometimes I might even have 2 cans of sardines plus a boiled egg, depending on how hungry I'm feeling. And then if I'm having steak around 250 grams, which is, what's that in ounces? 9 ounces. I would serve myself out about that much. And I may not finish it all, but I would give my body the opportunity to eat that much. And same with fish, chicken. I don't measure it or weigh it occasionally, but I know how much a steak weighs. Or if we're having burgers, I know I'll have at least a burger patty, but sometimes I might have 1.5 or even 2 if I'm really hungry. Basically, that's my protein intake. I don't measure it. I am guided by my body, but I have been experimenting with eating more and more protein. That's how I eat enough protein. And I know that I'm getting enough because my nails grow fast, they're strong and healthy. And the big kind of canary in the coal mine thing for me is my hair. If I'm not getting enough protein, my hair starts falling out and I'm okay, Jules, time to eat more protein. I'll be washing my hair. I'm like, oh, all this hair coming out. Okay, cool. And invariably something will have happened and I will have been having less protein. It's a really easy fix. And one thing that I did record a podcast episode on this recently, I did used to have protein as a snack, protein powder as a snack. I did experiment with that for a while, but I decided not to continue that because it was artificially flavored, which isn't great for gut health. And I also had been giving it to Finbar, my youngest. He really loved it with yogurt. It is very delicious. And we had this vanilla flavored one, but he ended up getting this weird rash on his legs. And I was like, that was weird. What's going on with that? And then I had the thought of sometimes dairy can cause eczema stuff. What happened? So the only thing we'd changed had been he'd started having a lot of protein powder. So we experimented with cutting it out and the rash went away and hasn't come back. I think there is a place for protein powder, particularly if you get one that doesn't have any artificial flavorings. But also I am mindful of that whole food approach, and we haven't, as a species, evolved to be eating copious quantities of whey protein isolate or whatever protein powder you're having. I think it's up to you to make that call. But yeah, if you can get one that's not sweetened artificially, then protein powders can be helpful, but I prefer to have my protein at meal times and have it from whole food sources. Oh, and the other protein that I really love that I should have mentioned is I really love tofu. And oftentimes we had my Irishman cooked bolognese on the weekend, and the boys had theirs with pasta, but I diced up some tofu and put it in the air fryer and crisped it up a little bit. And then I had my bolognese on top of tofu, and it was a little bit like a crispy gnocchi. Because it's so bland, it goes really well with strongly flavored pasta sauces. I probably have tofu definitely 3 or 4 times a week. So it's a really great, if you're a vegetarian, it's a really great source. And you also get the benefits of the phytoestrogens, which help with menopause symptoms. So it does have that bonus as well. It is really bland, right? So it does take a little bit of getting used to cooking, but keep that in mind that they don't add any salt when they're making it. So it needs to have some sort of seasoning added, some sort of salt added to it, and then it will taste good. That's how I eat enough protein. And then what to watch out for. One thing I'm more mindful of is, now that I'm eating a lot more protein, is the fat content. So if I am going to have a big steak, I want it to be a lean steak, because it can be really easy to eat way more calories than you need if you're having fatty cuts of meat. So, but if I was having some Wagyu, I'd only have a small amount of that, and I'd either have less protein for that meal, or I'd add in something else. Maybe have some tofu with it because it's really low fat. The reason I mentioned this is actually my last blood test, my cholesterol level, which has never been high, was inching up, was still within the normal range, but it was at the top of the normal range. So I was like, maybe eating 2 dozen eggs a week is not a good strategy. So I have cut back my eggs significantly, but that being said, I do still have eggs a couple of times a week. So be mindful of the fat intake if you are increasing. And if I'm having chicken, I love chicken skin, but if I'm eating a lot of chicken, then I don't eat all the skin from the chicken. I'll give myself the best bits, but then leave the rest behind. In terms of bonus tip, my first bonus tip for you is, one thing to make this really easy on yourself is doing what I call investment cooking. And all of what that looks like is, anytime you make cooking anything, any protein, ask yourself, does it make sense for me to make more of this? Generally, the answer is yes. So if I'm boiling eggs, I don't boil a couple of eggs, I boil a dozen. Or if I'm poaching some chicken breast, then I will do either a kilo, so 2 pounds, or I sometimes will do, if my Irishman's going to be around and he might want some chicken as well, then sometimes I would do 2 kilos, so 4 pounds at a time. And that's a bonus tip for you. I've been perfecting my poached chicken breast recipe, and the best way I've found is, so get chicken breasts, if they're really big ones, chop them into 3 lengthwise. If they're smaller, then I cut them in half lengthwise. Put them in the slow cooker. And yeah, at least a kilo, so at least 2 pounds. Put them in the slow cooker. Cover it with 4 cups of boiling water from the kettle, and then put it on high for about an hour. And then as it's getting close to the hour mark, start testing it with a meat thermometer. And you want it to be getting up to 65°C, which I can't remember what that is in Fahrenheit, but whatever chicken cooking temperature is. And as soon as it gets to that temperature, turn her off, and I add some salt to the water as well. And sometimes I add some herbs or some spices, like some fennel seeds can be nice. And then I leave it in the cooking broth, and then I'll serve it and pack away whatever I don't need. And then you get this bonus of, you've got the moistest, nicest chicken breast you can get. It's still not the most succulent meat, but it's very, very delicious. And then also you get the light chicken stock as well. Yeah, I like to do that every now and again. That's my first bonus tip, is investment cooking protein. And if I'm making meatballs, I won't make enough for that meal. I'll make a double batch. Or if we're cooking burgers, if my Irishman's cooking burgers, I'll make enough burger patties to have leftovers. And then sometimes I'll pack them up for school lunches, and sometimes I'll have the extra burger patties. Yeah, always make more protein. Then I've always got heaps of protein options in the fridge, which makes it really easy. And then my second bonus tip for you is, I actually did an experiment last year for a couple of weeks to try and gain weight. And the only change I made was to increase how much protein I was having. And I did in the end gain a little bit of weight, but I was eating truckloads of protein, and it was really hard. And I thought, I'm sick of this experiment, so I stopped. But it is hard to overeat protein. That's a nice thing to go into this with, you don't have to worry about that, overdoing it. And then my microscopic habit that I invite you to experiment with this week is experiment with serving yourself more protein and seeing how that goes this week. If you normally have 3 eggs or 2 eggs, up it to 4. Or if you normally have 1 piece of fish, maybe try having 1.5 pieces of fish or 2 pieces of fish and seeing how that goes. Yes, and I'll link to I've got a really great recipe, reliable boiled egg recipe where I actually steam them instead of literally boiling them, and it gives you the most perfect boiled eggs every time. I'll link to that in the show notes. And I'll also link to that 5-day challenge if you did want to sign up for that and learn how to make healthy meals without a recipe to make it easy for you to eat more protein forward. Definitely check that out. Have a fantastic week enjoying your protein, and I'll catch you next week. Bye.